of the preliminary facts involving the case that was videoed from last night. What I can first tell you is that the case has already been submitted to our Internal Affairs Division. There is an investigation that is already underway, and you all know as well as I do the limitations provided by the Data Practices Act. You probably know the Data Practices Act far more than you'd like to know, and you also know that it's not a matter of me wanting to comment or not comment. I'm literally prohibited from doing so, and if I were to provide further explanation at this point, it would very likely jeopardize the investigation and the case and outcome of it itself. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the Chief to see if he can provide any additional information regarding the instance from last night. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. To your question regarding last night's incident, the public information that I'm aware of is that a violent felony carjacking occurred in the city of New Hope. Eventually, that vehicle was picked up by Robbinsdale Police Department. It made its way into Minneapolis. I believe ultimately it was stopped around the 3200 block of James Avenue North. Once Robbinsdale was conducting their stop to try to bring those individuals into custody, at some point in time a help call was toned, and so MPD officers arrived to assist. At some point in time, they needed to make sure one of the individuals out there, the suspects, could get some medical attention. They needed to, because of the crowd, they needed to get him out of the area to get that treatment. Eventually, he was treated. But then the incident you're specifically talking about that has made its way on video, that is being investigated, as the mayor indicated right now. There is an open investigation on that, and so I'm also going to be limited in terms of what I can say to that at this point in time, but I appreciate the question.
Yeah. There are some people who are calling for you to fire the officer who was seen punching someone. Have you made a decision about that, and will you do it? Why or why not? Yeah,
the question is there are some individuals in the community who have made a declaration that the officers should be fired. That is, that's not the first time that that type of declaration has been made. As chief, it's important for me. Each case is very different. You have to let the investigation, and I have to receive information. They have to have the time to collect the evidence, and so at this time there's been no decision, and this just occurred obviously last night, and so this is real early into the investigation.
Chief, the incident there in question, that punch, was that related to the carjacking suspects, or was that an auxiliary group of people there? Do you know?
The question is the use of force, or alleged use of force that had come involved in that, was that related to the actual suspect who initially Robbinsdale PD was trying to take in custody? That I don't know at this point in time.
Was that person taken into custody?
The carjacking suspect? Yes.
And then the person
was taken into
involved in
custody.
the use of force question here, was that person also taken into custody?
Yes. So the other individual that you just mentioned, that suspect was taken into custody as well.
Yes. Chief, you have a message for the community. Obviously, people are upset. The perception of this video has a ripple effect, especially through North Minneapolis. People I talk to say, here we go again. What message do you have for the community? I know it's early in the investigation, but do you try to calm fears? I mean, people are upset.
Yeah, the question is what message do I have for community? Some of those community members who have experienced or live with just distrust of police, and so I would say allow us the time to conduct a thorough investigation. As Mayor Fry indicated, this is real recent. We are going to conduct a very thorough investigation. I would also say that many of our community, particularly the 4th Precinct community, they have a really strong relationship with 4th Precinct officers. They have a wonderful leader in Inspector Adams over there. He will not shy away from having tough conversations, and they will continue to show up and be in service of their community. So rest assured, there will be an investigation that takes place, but we are still going to continue to go out there, be in space, provide that service, and do so professionally. And so that would be the message that I would have for that community. as well. The other thing, though, I will say, and this is not specific to that incident, but this is specific, we saw this even last year, we need to allow our men and women to respond to these scenes and help people. We need to allow our ambulances to get into those scenes, and while there may be distrust or sentiment of concern by some community, we have to respond. We're first responders. We thank goodness we've not had a situation I'm aware of, even stemming from last year, where EMS was delayed and someone died as a result of that. But those moments and minutes are very critical, and so if people are experiencing what they feel may be a complaint or an issue by first responders, we can deal with that later, but we want to make sure that we're addressing the important need right now to make sure we're providing for public safety and make life-saving measures. And so that's a message that I would still want all of our Minneapolitans to continue to make sure that our first responders, our fire, our EMS, our police can get in there to those scenes. If they have to help save lives, so they can do that first and foremost.
Chief, are you going to release any body camera video from that incident?
The question is, are we looking at releasing any body-worn camera video? We like to take that as a measured approach. The mayor has been very specific on that. We like to look at these as a case-by-case basis. Again, this is less than 24 hours, and so we want to at least give some chance for the investigation to take part.
Did that investigation, that internal affairs investigation, start last evening or today?
The question was, did the internal affairs investigation start last evening? Typically it does. It's sections of it that what is very typical is pulling reports and securing body-worn camera footage, any other types of video at the scene. And so typically it started last night, but it'll start to ramp up throughout the next several days.
Chief, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the beginning of the video where, I mean, there's an alleged robbery suspect there, and it appears that the officers are handling the suspect with extreme care. It was almost reminiscent of the George Floyd video where someone seemed totally panicked to go into the car. And the officers didn't force this person into the car. In fact, they walked this person away. And is this as a result of Floyd in different training, or what happened in that instant? You know, aside from the punch, before that, did anything change there?
Yeah, the question is, you're talking about specifics last night as to officers' response, and is it a response that we've seen differently from last year? Again, as the mayor indicated, I want to be very cautious not to speak too much about the ongoing investigation. What I will say that has, de-escalation is paramount in the work that our officers do. It's paramount in terms of trying to calm tense situations. I will say, and it's not reflective of yesterday's event, but even from last year, this notion that we will have to think of alternative ways to get people who need life-saving measures or medical attention, have to walk them sometimes out of the scene, that's a new normal, quite frankly, that we've seen. It's unfortunate. We want to make sure that EMS, fire can get in there, treat them right where they're at. That's an important life-saving measure. Chief Cruz is here from MFD, but I think he'd agree that seconds and minutes are precious in terms of rendering medical aid. But that is certainly, that's a new normal for us, where we may at times at scenes throughout the city, we have to physically move people away from that scene because they can't manage it right then and there.
Finally, aside from the incident, as a use of force, is a closed fist, running punch, a haymaker, ever authorized as a use of force? If the suspect has a weapon or if your life's, is it ever authorized to be used by your police?
The question being, is it ever a punch, an authorized use of force that could ever, in any circumstance, I'm sorry?
That kind of punch. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to specifically talk to the case, but the statutory requirements, 609, the use of force, and it's very broad, and a lot of it has to do with discretion. A lot of it has to do with a reasonable officer, the events, the information, the facts that he or she sees at that time. And so, again, not talking about specific cases, but have there been times absolutely where that's justified? For sure. But use of force, statutorily, it can be very broad, and so I don't want to pin it on a specific situation. Yeah.
Chief, to follow up on, you're talking about the de-escalation techniques and training. Do you know what specifically may have been used in this incident last night, de-escalation-wise?
Well, again, not the question about what types of de-escalation training and what might have been utilized, I'll probably not talk so much about last night's incident, but in general, our officers, one tactic that we're using in terms of de-escalation is time, distance, and cover. If officers have the time where they can slow down the situation, that's a key piece to de-escalation. Distance. If officers can afford themselves some distance from the situation, that's very important. Voice, commands, those types of things. I need you to stay back. We're dealing with this situation. Can you please step back? We'll get you some information here shortly. Please let EMS in to do their jobs, fire, what have you. All of those things are parts of de-escalation, and we are employing our officers to utilize those skills. It's part of our ongoing training, and it will continue to be. In addition to crisis intervention training, we know that there are many in our communities that are suffering wellness issues, trauma issues, and so having that crisis intervention training is very important, recognizing that there may be community members who are struggling, and so it may not be what you see on the surface. There could be other things that are prompting that, and so de-escalation training, crisis intervention training, those are always going to continue to be very key tools for our men and women to utilize.